that's how I was raised. My parents, we always had, random people from Ecuador living in our house, and I'm like, who is this? I would always be like, this is the clown house. I'm like, there's so many people here, but my grandpa, my mom, and my grandma, like, pero mija, like, if we can help, we gotta help, and to me, like, that's kind of ingrained in me. And I genuinely, it genuinely makes me feel good to know that, like, I'm working for an organization that is helping people. And I love being able to say, like, the girl that does my nails, I was just like, do you have insurance? And she's like, no, I need help. And I was like, okay, you got to call this person. You got to call this person. And I'm like, that's a good thing. Like, people need to know that this is available, and just like, because somebody helped me, somebody helped my grandma, somebody helped my grandpa, you can't go through life without somebody.
Welcome to Career Cheat Code. In this podcast, you'll hear how everyday people impact the world through their careers. Learn about their journey, career hacks, and obstacles along the way. Whether you're already having the impact you want or are searching for it, this is the podcast for you.
All right. Veronica, welcome to the show.
Hi. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I appreciate you taking the time to join us. Let's dive right in. Let's tell the world what it is you do for a living.
Oh boy. I am the Senior Director of Health Policy and Community Affairs for Public Health Solutions. It is the largest public health nonprofit in New York City. And they do a little bit of everything, quite frankly. Anything from direct services that focus on food and nutrition, maternal and child health, sexual and reproductive health, health insurance access. We also run a program called New York City Smoke Free, which is a tobacco control program. And that's our direct services kind of prong. The second prong is our administrative management partnerships, where we partner with the city. We're a bona fide fiscal agent, and we manage a number of their Department of Mental Health and Hygiene contracts on their behalf. And then we also are a pass-through entity for the discretionary funding that goes to CBOs from the city council. So we help CBOs cross the T's, dot the I's, and make sure that they can focus on the direct services work. And then the third thing is that we work to build pathways between health systems and the resources that are available in a community. So that's like a three-prong approach. Our mission is to advance health equity for all New Yorkers, and my job is to amplify the work that this organization has been doing for the last 60 years and making sure that everybody knows that they are a thought leader in it.
Awesome. So what does that mean as a Senior Director of Health Policy and Community Affairs? What does that mean for you on a Monday when you walk in? What are you tasked with thinking about, with leading, with executing?
It varies from day to day. I don't think there's like a set schedule. My job is to advise the executive team regarding policy, regarding government and community relations. I lead the government and community relations strategy for the organization. So we have a state lobbyist, a city lobbyist. So I am the point person to just kind of talk with them and get their guidance and develop, the best strategy so that we can position ourselves in the best way in front of key decision makers, right, at the state, at city, and federal level. So it's dynamic. It changes. Right now, we're in the thick of the budget, New York State budget and city budget as well. So we've been advocating for, two big priorities for our sector. One is more so for the sector, just improving the wages of the community-based public health workforce, because these are folks that are the frontline workers, but they are paid poverty wages. You have a nutritionist that goes to college, wants to work in his or her community, works with us for 6 months, and they qualify for the same benefits that we are advising our clients to apply for. And that's unacceptable. So there's a lot of education that has to be done, because I think people assume that they're part of a bucket that was given bonuses and cost of living adjustments, but they're not. So that's been our charge since I joined, to really advocate for that and making sure that, these people that look like your mom, look like my mom, who've been, serving the community and making sure abuela gets her health insurance, be able to pay their bills, So that's one. And then for another priority that my focus has been on for the last year and a half, but definitely during this budget season, is to make sure that we get funding for our 2 sexual and reproductive health clinics that we have in Brooklyn. We have a little bit of an operational deficit, but we've been really, really, really good about getting grants. And we have an incredible, almost $4 million grant that the state gave us last year. But that just handles the capital. So, it's me kind of shaking my my little, we need money because this is a clinic that has been around. These two clinics have been around for a long time, and they're a key part of the fabric of the neighborhoods, Brownsville and Fort Greene. So we want to make sure that we can, keep the doors open and make sure that we can kind of fulfill the long-term dream of making it a big, campus that's holistic and provides, so many more services that we think people should have access to.
Seeing that you do so much, is this what you always wanted to do for a living, though?
Yes.
Really? Tell me more. When you were 16, what did you think you wanted to do, and how is that actually playing
yes
out?
and no. I wanted to sing when I was 16, and I wanted to sing on Broadway when I was 16. But, when you're a daughter of immigrants, it's not really feasible to do that. My grandfather was a professional singer and pretty well known back home in Ecuador. And so we always grew up around musicians and with music, and it's a very important part of my upbringing, but it doesn't pay the bills.
So when you say yes to that answer or to that question, what did you mean by that? How are you doing that?
Well, I always liked government. I always
Mm.
I always thought politics was really interesting. Again, my family, after Sunday, after church, they was always talking about religion, politics, ethics, money. Like it was that kind of conversation with all my tios and tias. And I would be the 10-year-old in the mess and be like, well, I think, I don't know. They never shooed me away because I just like listening to them like argue hard, but it was always really interesting just to hear their perspective. And they were very, very knowledgeable about politics and about, things that were important. So I kind of grew up with that kind of mindset, right?
Mhm.
So I always wanted to work in politics, not necessarily like run for office. I would go back and forth about it, but I wanted to be the person in the room.
Tell me more. So you mentioned your family's from Ecuador. Where were your parents born? Where were you born, and where were you raised?
Yeah, my mom is from Guayaquil, Ecuador. My father is from Santo Domingo, DR. And I was born in Brooklyn, and my mom lives Sunset Park.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, I know much about Sunset Park. I spent a lot of my time
Yeah.
at EDC working in
Oh
Sunset
yeah,
Park
yeah,
and doing all a bunch of things there. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
So
my parents actually met at the World Trade Centers. They both worked there. The
wow.
old ones, obviously. My dad was apparently like trying to rap to my mom for a while, and she was like, whatever.
What were they doing there? What kind of work?
So my dad, if I remember correctly, he worked for like an import-export company, like an insurance company, like logistics. And then my mom was an executive assistant for some company.
Your parents meet at the World Trade Center. Eventually they get together. You start growing up in Sunset Park. Tell me what happens your senior year of high school. What did you think you were going to do, and what did you actually end up doing?
I thought I was going to go to NYU, and I did.
I love that for you.
I
What did you go to
didn't want to
NYU for?
apply initially. I didn't want to apply because I didn't think I would get in. But my AP English teacher was like, "You'd be a fool not to apply." And my aunt Ketty was like, "You have to apply." But ever since I was little, I always saw NYU, and I always thought it was like the dream school. So I didn't think I could get in, but I got in.
Great. What'd you get in for? Did you go deciding what your major was going to be, or did you figure that out along the way?
Yeah, it was going to be politics and journalism, but it ended up being politics and history.
Got it. Okay. Well, one, why that switch? And two, what kind of student were you? Were you like a super involved, all the clubs, all the extracurricular stuff, or you just, head down in the books, get to
Well, I
class?
was a commuter for the first 2 years, so it was kind of hard. Honestly, I think like as a commuter, it was difficult. And then I had a car accident the weekend before the second semester of my freshman year, so that kind of changed things. Got my teeth knocked out, lip was hanging off my face, kind of disfigured for a whole year. Pretty much was out of school for about 3 months, so that kind of interrupted a lot of things. But I was able to finish and do what I need to do.
So tell me about that time. So you get into this car accident. Did you basically take a semester off at that point?
No. So I was out of school for 3 months. No, 2 months. Well, no, from January. I didn't go back to school until like end of March, beginning of April. And they wanted to kick me out because I remember the dean was like, there's no way you can catch up. And of course, they have no problem kicking out a Latina who's on a scholarship, right? So I was like, the hell you are going to kick me out? There's no way. And thank God my teachers and my professors, they were all really cool, and they were like, no, we got her. We'll make it work. And I went to school. I went back to school with like a thing on my mouth. I looked like a weirdo, but I made the dean's list that year. So
That's awesome. That's how you get them back. That's how you show
well,
them.
I don't like somebody telling me I can't do something, and especially when it comes from an old white man. Don't tell me I can't do this. I went to his office. I was like, here. So
Were you involved in a bunch of clubs and internships or anything like that while you were there, or?
so I worked for Anthony Weiner during college as an
Okay.
internship. Yeah. And then as far as clubs, not so much. I joined a sorority end of sophomore year. Yeah, spring of sophomore year, I joined a sorority, a mostly white sorority.
Shout them out.
Yeah, Alpha Phi Zeta, and they were local, and they'd been around for like 30 years, and they were just really fun, and I loved them. Best decision I made in college because I found my folks. But like even before then, like when we first started, and when you because we got into like the scholarship program, like they kind of thought that you weren't smart enough to like hack it, so they made you go to summer school before. So that's where I met like my 5 Latina girlfriends that I'm still really, really close with most of them at this point. So yeah, I had that crew, right? And then I was able to dorm on campus. I finagled my way to getting housing, and I lived with a sorority, and I loved it. It felt like real college at that point, you know?
That makes sense. It's a whole different experience when you're there immersed,
Yeah.
and you have your group of friends at that point.
Yeah. And like, it was great because I still went home on Sunday. You know what I mean? I had to, have a sopita and, get my laundry done and whatever. But it was, I think, living on campus, having your folks, like NYU had like a cute little, like, like the little trolleys and stuff that would take you from dorm to dorm. So it was great. I loved it.
Fast forward, you're now in a sorority. You have your major in politics and history. You have internships with elected officials at that time. Senior year, similarly, did you have a good sense of what was going to happen after college? I mean, how did that actually play out?
A week before I was supposed to register for to graduate, the study abroad Buenos Aires campus opened, and my scholarship was for 5 years. So I called my mom. I'm like, I'm not graduating in May. And she's like, yeah. I was like, I'm going to go to Buenos Aires for free. And I did my last semester. So I graduated in 4.5 semesters or 4.5 years. So my last semester I was in Buenos Aires, kind of not really doing work. I had like one real class that I had to take. Everything else was like an elective, but it was just, how could I not? I had studied abroad in the summer when I was a junior in Italy, in southern Italy. But this, to me, Buenos Aires, South America, I was just like, hell yeah, I'm going to do it. And they're paying for it. I was just like, I'd be crazy not to do it. So when I came back in in December of 2008, that was like right when the recession hit. So I was nervous, but I was just like, oh, I'll be fine. I'll figure it out. I was working with a friend who managed a radiology facility on the Upper East Side. So she's like, well, you can work here until you find something. And I was like, all right. I had a job when I got home. I didn't really have to struggle, which is a blessing.
So what were you doing there?
So I was a patient coordinator for the offices. So basically like front desk receptionist-ish, but then like managing slots and managing, all of the radiologists and the techs and stuff and the patients, because we saw a very, very wide variety of patients. Like we had patients that, had very limited means, and then we had Mariah Carey and Nick Cannon coming in. So you have to treat them with the same, level of respect. So it wasn't a job that I would ever be at long term, but it definitely taught me how to deal with people with a smile on my face, even when I didn't want to have a smile on my face, even if they were really, really out of pocket and rude and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it plays into what you do now, right? So it's just
You have to be like,
kind of starting point.
You have to do one of these, I remember it was the Upper East Side, so it's those kind of people. So it was one of those where they're like, do you speak English? And I'm like, I speak 3 languages. Which one would you prefer? And they're like, oh. Mm-hmm. I remember Charlie Rose came in one time. He was the meanest guy in the whole world. So when he went down after for the Me Too thing, I was like, good for you, buddy. I was just like, you suck. But he was nasty, nasty, nasty.
Hmm.
And then most of the people were lovely. Like, most of the celebrities and like athletes were really sweet, really kind. I can't really complain, but like I was there for 4 years and I still remember Charlie Rose and how rude he was. He was just like such a grumpy, mean old man
Hmm.
that had never been told no.
Hmm.
You know?
Absolutely.
So I really enjoyed it when he went down.
That's funny. Why did you stop working there? What came after that?
Well, I never intended to be there forever. I was going to
Mm-hmm.
be there until I figured out, am I going to go to law school? Am I going to get a master's? So I was studying to take my LSATs after 2 years there. And then I had taken the classes and stuff. And the morning of the exam, I walked out of my house and I walked right back in. I was like, I don't want to do this. I was like, I don't want to do this. And I upset everyone in my family and my friends and everybody that thought that, of course, Veronica's going to be a lawyer. She never likes to shut up, you know. But I was like, I really don't want to do this. So then I took another 2 years to figure out my next steps. I think a year longer than I should have, honestly, because you start making money, you start hanging out, you start kind of thing. And you're just like, I don't know what to do. But I think my family and my friends definitely were like, Veronica, like, you are destined for a lot more than what you're doing right now. And so get it together. And I felt a little stuck. So I definitely needed that push from people and a little bit of like that shaming. Like gentle, right? They're like, we love you. We're like, we don't know what's going on with you, but you need to figure it out. And I was like, you're right. I do. So
All right. So tell me, where did you apply to grad school and why?
So I applied to the new school, the Milano School for Public Engagement in 2012. And I applied honestly because it was one of the few programs that didn't require a GRE. I was like, I studied for the LSAT. I didn't take the LSAT. I am not doing this again. I'm like, that's it. So I just, what filtered out my options was, do I have to provide it, take the GRE or not? So,
That's right.
and it was in the city. It was by 14th Street. And then I had gone to an information session and I had no idea that the school had been around as long. It had been started by like Jewish intellectuals after World War I or II. And like MLK gave courses or taught there or like lectured there. Like it was really interesting. I was like, oh, I had no idea. I got in and they gave me a little bit of a scholarship, which was awesome. I was living on my own at that point and I had to move back in with my grandparents and my mom and give them my independence in my apartment because I couldn't afford to do both. But it was an investment. It was worth it.
What did you get your master's in, and why did you feel like that was an investment that you needed at that time?
I got my master's in international affairs management and urban policy. And I think that gave me, I didn't want to be limited to just one thing with my master's degree, and I also wanted to work for the UN at one point. And so like I wanted that international kind of lens too. And then the urban policy piece is just, how cities run. And I've always been interested in that. And the management piece is, I think, also really important and kind of overlooked. So that was the major that I really kind of focused on and I really liked it.
Did you know what you wanted to do with that? Like off rip? Like was it like I want to go to the UN at some point? Like what did you?
Yeah, and I did. I interpreted for a world conference.
Huh.
My last year of college. Yeah, the women's like the 50s. It was like the 52nd or 53rd annual like women's conference, and I interpreted as a Spanish speaking interpreter for one of their sessions. And it was awesome. It was so cool. I'd never been in there. But then I realized that it was really, really hard to get into the UN. It's kind of impossible. It's like Google. Like you got to know somebody to get in, that kind of thing. But I remember being like, maybe I want to be a foreign service diplomat. Maybe I want to, work for the CIA or that kind of thing. So I wanted to make sure to keep my options open.
Now in retrospect, do you feel like that was an investment that was worth it?
Yes.
Why?
I loved it. If I could go back, it was a better experience at NYU, 100%. NYU, my teachers were great. My the friends and the networks that I made were great. But it was not the kumbaya liberal experience that you thought it was. And a lot of the people students that went there made you realize very quickly that you're not one of them because there was a lot of wealth, you know? So as a Brooklyn person who was, more or less like lower middle class, but I always went to a good school, and we lived in a house, we had cars. I was like, oh, I'm poor.
Mm.
And because they were very clear about that, the people, like some of the students, and they were awful, and I hated them. But I found my people, so it was fine. I still remember the college Republicans had a bake sale based off of, they had baked goods and cookies and stuff, and each cookie was 25 cents if you were Native American female, 50 cents if you were a white man, because they were protesting affirmative action. And I would have to always, say like, I didn't get here through affirmative action. I got here through the HEOP program. But even if I did, I'm like, you can't even spell. So, me taking the one seat in a 200-person lecture class because your buddy Chad couldn't get in is not my problem. It was those kind of people. And that sucked. But the teachers are awesome. And the people that I, my sorority, my HEOP friends, like they were all awesome. But the new school, the teachers, the professors, they were real world practitioners. They weren't just academics, which is why I loved it. These were folks that had started NGOs, had worked at the World Bank, or like on MSNBC, giving like the finance tips, that kind of stuff. So everything that we learned, they were very clear if it was something that was practical or not. So they would say, X theory, you have to learn this, but this shit doesn't really work in practice, but you should know it, but this is not real. And then everybody that I went to school with, all the students, I had never felt so small initially when I first went, because they were like 22, 23, and I was already 26 or 27 because I went to grad school after 4 years after college. And they were like, oh, when I was 10, I started my own NGO. And I was like, they're like, and, I sued this person and I was able to change this law. And I was just like, God damn. I was like, Jesus. I'm like, I thought I was smart, but I was like, clearly I have no ambition. So it was intimidating to be around those people. But they were, for the most part, everybody was always really sweet and cool. And I usually got along with like the older students that were like adults because they were serious about like doing their work and going home. But I made some really good friends there too. Okay. So I just loved it. I loved it so much.
Okay. So
I tell everyone, I'm like, go to the new school, get your master's there. It's great. And the teachers, the professors, I still talk to some of them. There was one, Robert Buckley, older guy, and he was just the cutest like grandpa, but really smart, and this other guy, Michael Cohen, he was incredible. Like, I just loved them. They were just good people.
Yeah, the new school has a great reputation for attracting really good faculty and talent, and students. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
You get this master's in international affairs, and you graduate. What do you do next?
I had gotten an internship with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey while I was in graduate school. Because the first year of grad school, I went there full time, right? But then the second year, I was just like, I need money. I was just like, so I was looking for internships. And all of these internships were unpaid. And I was just like, clearly these are for folks that have money. These are for like Los Blanquito. And I'm like, this doesn't work for me. So I had gone to an information session for the Leadership Fellowship Program for the Port Authority. And that was for graduating grad students. And it basically was like a sped up like track to middle management, because the Port Authority had like a lot of folks that were retiring. So there was a big gap between folks that had just started and then like senior people, and a lot of the middle management was leaving. So this program had been created, years in advance to kind of create like a pipeline, and you did like a 2-year program. It was rotational. You did 6 months at each department, and then basically like departments would fight for you, and then you would end up at the department you wanted. However, I was in my first year of grad school. So they're like, well, it's for the second year. I'm like, okay, well, do you have anything else? And they're like, yeah, we have the college, in the grad school internship program. They're like, and it's paid. I was like, say no more. And that's it. So I applied and I got in, and I was an intern for the Government Community Relations Department for New York in 2014. May 2014 is when I started. And then I was made a full-time employee in December of 2014
Got it.
in 7 months.
Tell me about what you were tasked with doing when you were hired full time, and how long did you stay there?
When I was hired full-time, I was hired as a senior legislative representative. So my task was to monitor, track, and or respond to legislation that impacted the Port Authority, whether it was positively or negatively. So I had to track bills, at the state level and to a certain extent, city level, even though the Port Authority is by state entity, so it's not really bound by single state legislation, right? Or city council, but the agencies that we work with are, right? So you still have to be aware of what was happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, EDC, Port Authority, we have a lot of crossover. So it was my job to track that. And then I also had some of the assets from the Tunnel, Bridges, and Terminals Department under my portfolio, where I was like the dedicated government relations liaison for that. And I had the George Washington Bridge bus station and the George Washington Bridge redevelopment project, where we modernized the hub, the transportation hub up there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have a standout project that kind of stuck with you that you were a part of?
Yeah. So the Restoring the George is a $2 billion 10-year capital program made up of 11 projects. So that was under my purview. And the bridge is like an old lady, right? She's, in her, I think she was 89 at that point. So like all of the approaches, it was a massive, massive project. So it was really important to make sure that we were keeping the community in mind and looped in. And it was important to me because I'm half Dominican. So I always felt that the same amount of attention that the Midtown bus terminal got, I also believe that the Uptown terminal should get, right? In addition to the Restoring the George, the GWBBS, the bus station redevelopment, there was an opportunity to ensure that modernized hub was also kind of like a shopping area. So there was a Marshall's there. There was like a Citibank, a Blink, a Fine Fair with like actual fresh food. And then the electeds up there, headed up by State Senator Espaillat and Councilman Rodriguez at the time, had kind of a contentious relationship with the Port Authority because they wanted a community space there for free. But we were able to negotiate a community space for 10 years, rent-free. I was the key lead in that process, and it took 5 years. But now there is a dedicated community space that's run by the fabulous Laura Acosta from the Juan Pablo Duarte Foundation. And it's a cultural hub for folks, and it's a place where you can have workshops and educational seminars, and it's a gathering place, but it's a place that's for the community, not just electeds.
Absolutely.
And I loved her. I still love her. She's fantastic. I'm going to plug that she's having her 25th anniversary annual festival this year, I think in June. And it's an organization that does really, really good work. It's been around for a long time. And I think she is the best steward for managing that space. And me and her got along very well. And I think it was critical to make sure that there was somebody to be the liaison between her, the engineers, the operations folks, to make sure that we got this project over the finish line. And we did. We got it designed, planned, constructed, and opened in a year. $2 million investment for a community space that's about 1,600 square feet. It's beautiful. And it's rent-free for 10 years.
That's awesome.
So that's something that if I pass by there, I'm like, that's cool.
As someone that grew up in Washington Heights, I definitely remember that redevelopment. And, even years later, like my mom still shops at that supermarket, right? So that's in a way that she never really used the terminal before, right? Like we would walk past it when I was really young to go a block further for Blockbuster. But that was,
I remember I was told, because I never went up there when I was younger, because I'm from Brooklyn, right? And they're like, oh, this is where the pigeons all gather. And it was like a sports betting place. Like it was really, really kind of it was shady and not good. Now it's an area of commerce, right? And like there's dedicated seating for people to wait for the jitney buses. And it's you don't have to wait outside in the elements. Like it's an important thing, and I'm really proud of that.
Fast forward, you stayed at the Port Authority like 5 years or so, right? What title? 6 years. So tell me, what title did you leave with at the end of it, and what kind of made you determine that it was time to make a move after that, after 6 years?
So the title that I left with, I was at Band 4, which is nice. Band 4 External Relations Executive. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds fancy.
Yeah.
It sounds fancy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
It was.
I know.
I started as an intern, junior analyst, senior legislative representative, and then ended up as an external relations executive. Yeah.
What does that mean for someone that wants to get into like external relations, right, or government affairs, which is how our paths cross together between EDC and Port Authority, right? Like, is this a lucrative type of career, like doing external affairs? Like, can people make money enough to like feed their families while doing some work that is representative of what they feel like is really good impact, right? Like working with communities, as you said, right? Like, you may not be from the Heights, but you know the people of the Heights, right? So for you, is like, I am speaking on behalf of this community or working for this community and trying to bridge projects with this community because they are people
that they benefit from,
Absolutely.
because this is their neighborhood.
Yeah.
We are inconveniencing them.
Yeah.
Granted, they're also benefiting from living across one of the most beautiful bridges in the world, and they're like, well, why are we doing this construction? I'm like, do you want it to fall on you? See or no?
Yeah.
I was like, how do you think we're going to keep it up? They're like, well, we don't start charging us toll. I was like, listen, the Port Authority does not get any tax revenue from you. If you go into a store and take something, you got to pay for it, don't you? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, same concept. They're like, but are you on the MTA? I was just like, no. I was like, go complain to the state for the MTA. I'm like, that's not us. Like, the Port Authority ran like a business, and I think they do a really, really good job. And there's a lot of incredible public servants there that get a bad rap. And I'm like, you don't get to do that to these folks because they could be making double or triple their salary, and they chose to work in public service because they believe in it. So to answer your question, yes, I think you can make money, but you can make a lot more money in the private sector. But it's a trade-off. Like I have a pension and having a pension, I think, and a level of stability is really important to me. I'm not one of these folks that like to hop and skip around. Like I really, really, one of the things that attracted me to the agency was that there are people that have been there for 30 years, 40 years, and they had so many different careers because they started out in this department and then they moved to this department. And I'm just like, I like that. I believe in that kind of longevity and loyalty. And to me, that's important, because I think even if you're at a place for a year, it takes a full year to finally kind of get your bearings. And then like you live in two and just like, you didn't even like give it enough time, But I understand why people do that because that's the only way to like, increase your salary. Right. But to me, like, I genuinely think that I cut my public policy teeth at the government community relations department of the Port Authority. I had wonderful mentors. I had wonderful colleagues, and I'm still very, very close with a lot of them.
So you leave the Port Authority, you go to this other organization called
I-Core Strategies, yeah.
Why did you go there and what were you doing there?
So funnily enough, I used to manage the internship program for the government relations department. So we would get 2 interns every summer. So for 4 years, I managed the process. I would screen them, I would interview them, I would manage them, I would review them, they were my responsibility. So one of the interns, a girl named Phoebe Forlenza, ended up working at I-Core Strategies a couple years after she had left, finished her internship. And she had reached out to me and said, hey, Veronica, how are you? Like, I hope you're doing well. I'm like, oh my God, Phoebe. And she's like, well, I'm working here and it's in Brooklyn and it's, a Black-owned a community engagement firm. And I think, we're looking for a director for like to manage the East region for clients. And I think you'd be a good fit. So I was like, all right, let me check it out. I met with the CEO, Eric Eve, who is kind of New York political royalty. His father is is Arthur Eve, who was the deputy speaker of the New York State Assembly for a long time. His sister is Licia Eve, who ran for attorney general and is one of the Port Authority Board of Commissioners. So I knew he was a serious guy, and he had worked in government and then worked in the private sector and then decided to start his own thing. So, we talked for a few months. The first job that he offered, I declined because I didn't think it was worth leaving a pension for. So then he came back and he gave me something that I think that I couldn't say no to. But I thought about it for a long time, and then I got guidance from my mentor, Brian Simon, who was my first Port Authority boss director, and he was an incredible person, and you should absolutely talk to him. He kind of guided me through the process. He's like, ask for this, ask for this, ask for this. And I was just like, okay, they gave it to me. He's like, well, now you got to do it. He's like, if you don't like it, you leave. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, you're going to be fine. So I did. So I left March of 2020.
Okay. What were you tasked with doing there?
So it gave me the opportunity to manage a team, which is what I really wanted, right? Because at the Port Authority, I was an individual contributor and I had a portfolio and I had projects, right? But I had never managed people aside from interns, right? So I wanted that management experience. So I had a team of 2 direct reports. And then by the time I left, it was 4 direct reports, and consultants that I managed. So to me, what attracted me to that job was that I started off as a vice president of client and community engagement for the East region. So the East Coast. I really learned how to manage a team during that time. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm very grateful for that because that's something that I had lacked and I wanted.
In external affairs, right? I have had conversations with people where they can sometimes view our roles, right, as basically the mouthpiece of an organization. Like, your job is to go and tell me what the organization is going to do, and nothing's going to change regardless of what I say. So why should I even engage with you? Why should I even work with you? Can you tell me about your experience working with people and kind of shifting some of that mindset, right? Because for me, I had to deal with that going into actually Sunset Park, where, at the time, EDC did not have the best relationship. This is, talking about a decade ago, right? With that neighborhood, considering that, the organization managed so much square footage of the waterfront. Yeah. However, I think we, in these external relations roles, are tasked with going in there and talking to people and listening and then coming back and delivering some results.
They do make a strategic thing to put the black and brown people in front of folks. Mm-hmm. And that's strategic, and I get it. But for me, I would say there were tangible things. My job wasn't just to kind of be a mouthpiece for the agency. My job was also to be a mouthpiece for the community and be like, hey, are you guys thinking about X, Y, and Z? Because the community is not going to be down with X, Y, and Z if you do X, So at least for the Port Authority, when I first started, it was very, very reactive. They didn't talk to anybody. It was only when things were afire. And by the time I left, it was just night and day in terms of being proactive and building relationships, And even there were times where I was told explicitly not to talk to people, and I'd still call Carmen De La Rosa and I'd be like, hey, I can't talk to you, but because I'm like, we can't just go to these people when we need something. I'm like, that it doesn't work like that. It's a relationship. You have to talk to people. You got to show up and you got to be there. Even if they don't want you there, you still got to go because someone will respect the fact that you went in there knowing that you were going to get heat. And to me, I'm just like, I'm not scared of anybody because I wasn't raised that way. And I'm coming in good faith. So even if you're already coming to me with a guard up, it's my job to convince you otherwise. And if I don't do a good job at that, then that's okay. But I'm going to come back next time. And eventually you're going to be like, you know what? She's still here. And I'm like, okay, now can we talk?
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important to do that. And the agency, the Port Authority, I will say, for the capital plan, the 2 biggest changes to the capital plan were direct feedback from the community. So we did listen to the community, So, and I would say that I when people would be like, why are you even here? I'm like, we expanded the bike lanes on the GWB because of y'all. You guys kept talking and talking and talking. And so we finally, we reviewed and we're like, you know what? We could make this better. And it changed the project. It actually was a little bit more costly, but we knew that it was important to you. So the 2 changes of the capital plan when I was there was to expand, the middle part of the bridge. I should remember this, but to make it wider. so that pedestrians and cyclists didn't kind of bump into each other. And that was a direct piece of feedback that was incorporated after the public comment period. So I'm just like, guys, like, be honest here. If you want to use us as a boogeyman, that's cool, but we are listening to you. So when I would say those examples, they're like, well, that's true. Like, you are always here, and and you do job fairs, and you do call us, and you do talk. I was like, yeah, because I'm like, I don't know who you talked to before, but that's not me. You're talking to me now.
Absolutely.
So if you have a problem, you call me. What's going on? I think you earn people's trust. You kind of have to. You just you got to keep doing it.
I love that. And I think, part of some of the cheat codes that you kind of dropped there, right, are like that inside outside game. There's a lot of value. Like, yes, I work for this organization, and yes, I am tasked with delivering this project. And I am also tasked with building trust and building community and having people, not just for the sake of one specific project, but for the long term of our presence in these communities. So that inside outside game of, hey, I know you told me not to talk to these people, and I'm not going to tell you I'm going to talk to them, but I'm absolutely going to talk to them. And I think, part of that is also just being a person of service, right? Like, you work for the community.
And there were times where I fundamentally disagreed with decisions that my bosses made, and I'd be like, you're wrong. I'm like, this is going to blow in your face if you do this, and sometimes they listened to me and sometimes they didn't. But I was very much like, you know what? Like, I know that I'm representing the agency. I'm like, but what you guys are planning is not right. And this is not right. And it's not strategic either. So please do X, Y, and Z. Or there was one time the construction folks, the consultants, sometimes they ran the program managers, which drove me nuts. And the program managers were incredible. But, some of these people were a little sneaky.
Well, they're tasked and evaluated by different metrics.
Right. Sure. And there was a habit for a long time, like the government relations folks, like some of the line departments, the departments that made money, that brought in revenue, like didn't like to include us because they're like, oh, you're going to tell us no, we can't do this. But I worked really hard to become friends with the engineers and the architects and the program managers, because I'm like, my job is to protect you. So the only way I can do that is if you loop me in. Do not bring me in at the end. Because if you brought me in when we were planning it, I would have told you, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. Do not call me when there's an issue. So there was one time where these construction guys up at the GWB were going to take parking for 2 weeks during Christmas. And I said, no, you're not. I don't know who you are and why you're delaying our project. I'm like, I'm sorry, this project is 1.5 years delayed. I'm like, do not pin that on me. If you want to take parking spaces, have you guys flyered? Have you guys informed the community board? Have you guys talked to the elected officials? Because if you want the number of the congressman, I will literally forward the voicemail that he calls me to you, because you will talk to him. I was like, we're not doing it. Do it in January. You can wait after the holidays. And they were pissed. But my boss at the time, Justin Bernbach, I went to him, I'm like, you're going to get a phone call. And he's just like, you're right. He's like, that's fine. He's like, I trust you. I was like, they can't do this right now. And now they're complaining that the GoCorps is delaying the project. I was just like, no. That's your poor planning. That is not my problem. But you are not going to do this to folks. And if we are going to do it, we're going to do it the right way. So I made sure to flyer. I went door to door to every freaking apartment building with flyers. We created brochures. We put the flyers on all of the cars in advance, so that to give people a heads up. And we did not take parking spaces for 2 weeks during Christmas. We did it in January, in mid to late January. Because I was like, why would you do this during Christmas? People are away, so people might have their cars towed. People are visiting, and it's the damn holidays. And I remember telling these guys, I'm like, gentlemen, this isn't Legos. Would you like this happening in your neighborhood? They're like, well, no. I'm like, so why would you do it in my neighborhood? I was like, no. I'm like, and if there's a problem with this, then I'm like, that's fine. I'm like, but call whoever you need to call. I'm like, but we're not doing it. So I said no. And then I went immediately to my boss. I was just like, you're going to get a phone call. But I explained to him why. And he's just like, but you're right. And I was like, and then it was it.
I love that.
That was it.
I think,
But it's just like, don't do that. Like, just have some common sense. That's kind of messed up.
yeah.
Parking in Washington Heights by the bridge is a nightmare anyway. And you're gonna take it away for during the holidays?
Yeah.
Hello?
And yeah, and I think part of it is like people, you know, they're tasked with delivering a project on time and on budget. We're
Right, but
tasked with,
also you got to remember, like, this is you're not working in a vacuum. These are people's homes. These are neighborhoods. These are people that you're impacting. And my job is to make sure that we mitigate the impacts as much as possible. And it's my job to tell you that this is an issue. You should know already. I hear you, but it's really, really insensitive and kind of careless to think that people wouldn't have a problem with having this done during the holidays. So to me, it was I'm like, would you do this in the Midtown Tunnel? I don't think so. That there's another thing there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be clear.
I love that. What's your favorite part of your role? Like whether
Now?
it's right now or generally through your role as an external affairs professional.
It's funny. It's like, I don't like people, but I do like people. I think people are just so kind of divided and in their corners. And I'm like, everyone just needs someone. And I fundamentally believe in government and public service as like the only entities that are large enough to tackle big problems. And you might be in a good position today, but one mistake and you might be in a really bad position tomorrow. And I just feel like I think it's really, really important to help people if you can, and I think that you can, it's not entirely altruistic. Like, yeah, you want to make money, you want to, you want to live nice, but I want to be proud of the work that I do, and that's important to me. And I realized it took me a long time, but I'm like, I have to believe in the work that I'm doing to do it. If I don't believe in it, I can't do it. And to me, that's how I was raised. My parents, we always had, random people from Ecuador living in our house, and I'm like, who is this? I would always be like, this is the clown house. I'm like, there's so many people here, but my grandpa, my mom, and my grandmother, like, pero mija, like, if we can help, we gotta help, and to me, like, that's kind of ingrained in me. And I genuinely, it genuinely makes me feel good to know that, like, I'm working for an organization that is helping people. And I love being able to say, like, the girl that does my nails, I was just like, do you have insurance? And she's like, no, I need help. And I was like, okay, you got to call this person. You got to call this person. And I'm like, that's a good thing. Like, people need to know that this is available, and it's just like, because somebody helped me, somebody helped my grandma, somebody helped my grandpa, you can't go through life without somebody, and I just feel like there's so many people that are struggling, and it's a policy choice. I want to make sure that I'm not contributing to that.
Are there any forms of media that could be books, podcasts, shows that you have watched or read or listened to that have shaped you personally or professionally?
That have shaped me? Well, my favorite show when I was in high school was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And my grandma hated it. She's like, oh, it's a demonio. That's all like, demonic stuff. And I'm like, this show is actually very smart. Because it wasn't about monsters. The monsters were a metaphor for growing up and like the teenage years. And she was, a female like superhero. And she was funny to me. And I just thought she was so cool. I love that show so much. So like that was like my formative show growing up when I was in high school. But in terms of like shows or like things, I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know. I love film. I love TV. Like, I'm definitely one of those folks that, in another life, I would have loved to be on stage. So like the arts is something that's very near and dear to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes I would be at Broadway shows and I would cry because I'm like, I could have done that, and like it kind of hurts. Like, it's a little painful to watch them because you're just like, to be on stage. It's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But podcasts, I listen to The Daily a lot, New York Times, and then Errol Lewis. That's my man. I love that guy because he's fair and he goes after everybody. So Spectrum, New York One, that's kind of my Bible a little bit.
I think it's easy for folks to see you on LinkedIn or on whatever platform and realize your highlight reel and think, everything has always been great and peachy and amazing. Are there any hurdles that you've had to overcome or low moments in your life career that you're like, you know what, we went through that and we're fine right now, that you'd like to share with people?
It's not linear, that's for sure, I would say. I thought my life was going to be very, very specific. Like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And my life went like that, But thankfully, I always had people in my life that loved me and cared about me and protected me, you know what I mean? And hurdles, yeah, definitely. My car accident messed me up really bad. As a 19-year-old, getting your face messed up is not great. I did very well that semester, but a year later, I had the worst grades I've ever had in my entire life. And I had to crawl back to graduate with like a 3.3, but it was hard because I went through depression. Look, it was really hard. It was really hard. I think the sorority definitely saved my life because I had something to do. And I definitely kept going because I was like, well, I can't let these girls down. Like, I got to keep them. But I was a mess during that time, a whole complete mess. And then after, I was kind of lost because I didn't really know. I had convinced myself that I was going to be a lawyer. And then when I decided I didn't want to do it, I was like, well, what do I do now? And there's also that expectation of my family has worked so hard to get me to where I am, and my mom had a car accident after I was born and she became disabled after that. And subsequently every part-time job that she worked at was at my school and never cashed her own check because it went to my tuition. My grandparents, if I didn't have them, my life would have been very different, so there's a lot of, I couldn't be selfish because I have a lot of people that depend on me. Even though they'd be like, well, no, you put that on yourself. I'm like, yeah, but my mom's my mom. And, it's my job to take care of her. It's my job to take care of my family. And they've been through way, way too much for me to give up over something, over the, first world problems. So whenever I would get in my feelings of my grandparents did not raise me to be a punk, But I think in the last few years, COVID hit me really hard. I got sick twice, and that messed me up a lot. And my dad died, my grandfather, 6 years ago. So to me, my life is very much before him and after him. And it's been very hard to live without him.
Is there anything else the world should know about Veronica that we have not discussed today?
I don't know. What you see is what you get. I'm a little bit too open sometimes, and then my boss, Brian Simon, one of the best pieces of advice he gave me, especially in business, is you need to mask your tell. He's like, you are incredible because you are so genuine and authentic. He goes, but that can be used against you if you're not careful. So mask your tell, So I worked very, very hard to, not be very clear about how I feel about things. Because my face says everything. Sometimes I'm like, and I'm always like, fix your face, fix your face, fix your face. Especially if you're managing a team, you gotta, you do have to move differently, And me at Public Health Solutions, I'm on the executive team. You do have to move differently. And, Veronica, at home was very different from Veronica from PHS, and there's a reason for that, because I'm not representing just me. I'm representing an organization, and they deserve to have a level of professionalism that is expected, right? If you know me, I'm very, very honest. You know that, Radhy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
To a fault.
Got it. I love it. Well, thank you for joining us today. This has been great to learn about you and your path, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did and believe on the mission we're on, please rate, and subscribe to this podcast on whatever platform you're using, and share this podcast with your friends and your networks. Make sure you follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn at Career Cheat Code, and tell us people or careers you would like to see highlighted. See you next week with some more cheat codes. Peace.